I was just driving the old pickup around the block to make sure the brakes still worked. He burst out like I'd stolen his entire life, screaming, "That's mine," then ripping the keys from my hand. Blood tastes metallic, but the strangest feeling was calm, because the person who left me this truck, the only one who knew all his secrets, had already planned the final move. And the truck wasn't just carrying an engine, it was carrying evidence. My name is Lena Hart, and I've spent the last 10 years saving lives in Hawthorne Bend, Ohio, a Rust Belt town where the river runs brown and tow trucks circle like vultures. As an EMT and road safety compliance officer at Northline Response and Logistics, I've seen enough twisted metal and broken families to know that sometimes the real damage happens long before the crash. Hawthorne Bend sits heavy on the banks of the Muskingum River, all red brick and broken promises. The old factories that once employed half the town now stand empty. Their parking lots turned into salvage yards and mechanic shops. The air always smells like motor oil and disappointment, cut through with the sharp whistle of freight trains that don't stop here anymore. My mother Carol married Ray Mercer 5 years ago, right after my own divorce finalized. Ray owns Tristar Recovery, the biggest tow operation in 3 counties. He's the kind of man who measures success by how many cars he can drag off the highway before their owners can scrape together the impound fee. His son Zach works construction when he's not starting bar fights or helping his father squeeze money from people already down on their luck. The Ford F-150 that would change everything sat in Earl Mercer's driveway like a faithful dog waiting for its owner to come home. Earl was Ray's father, though you'd never know it from how little they spoke. While Ray built his empire on other people's misfortune, Earl lived quietly on the outskirts of town, a former long-haul trucker who kept to himself and asked for nothing. I met Earl during an emergency call 2 winters ago. He'd fallen on ice, too proud to call his son for help. After that, I started checking on him. Thursday nights became our routine. I'd bring hot meals after my shift, and he'd tell stories about the open road. "That truck out there," he'd say, pointing to the moss-green Ford. "She's like me, old, stubborn, but still got some miles left if someone treats her right." The pickup was a 1979 model, more rust than paint in places, but Earl maintained that engine like it was made of gold. Every weekend, I'd find him under the hood, hands black with grease, explaining carburetor adjustments and timing belts like they were poetry. He never asked why a woman in her 30s wanted to learn about vintage trucks. Maybe he just appreciated having someone who listened. "Your stepfather," Earl said one Thursday, setting down his coffee with shaking hands. "He thinks everything with wheels belongs to him. But that truck, she was never his. Bought her with my first paycheck from Interstate Freight, back in '81. Title's always been in my name, no matter what he tells people at the yard." 3 months later, Earl's heart gave out in his sleep. I heard about it from a neighbor, not from Ray, at the funeral. Ray barely looked at the casket, too busy glad-handing city officials and discussing tow contracts in the church parking lot. Zach spent the service texting, occasionally glancing up to smirk at the old truckers who'd come to pay respects. 2 weeks after we put Earl in the ground, Maya Colton called my cell. "Lena, I'm Earl Mercer's attorney. Could you come by my office? There's a matter concerning his estate that involves you directly." The law office smelled like old paper and lemon furniture polish. Maya, a sharp woman in her 50s with silver streaking her black hair, slid an envelope across her desk. Earl updated his will 6 months ago. He was very specific about this bequest. Inside was a notarized document transferring ownership of the 1979 Ford F-150 to me, along with a handwritten note. "For Lena, who sees the value in old things and treats them with kindness. Take care of her. There's more to that truck than meets the eye. P.S. Check under the bed liner." Maya handed me the title, already transferred to my name. He also left this supplementary document. I'm required to give it to you sealed. The second envelope was heavier, marked "Open only if necessary" in Earl's shaky script. I drove home in my Honda, the truck's title burning a hole in my pocket. I knew Ray would explode when he found out. In his mind, everything his father owned belonged to him by divine right. Never mind the law or Earl's wishes, but Earl had chosen me, and I wasn't about to dishonor his memory by refusing. That night, I photographed every inch of the truck. VIN number, engine serial, distinguishing marks. I uploaded everything to an encrypted cloud storage, then locked the original title in a fireproof safe I'd bought after the divorce. If Ray wanted a fight, I'd be ready with documentation. The moss green pickup waited in Earl's old driveway. Patient as always. Soon, I'd have to move it somewhere safe. But first, I needed to check what Earl had hidden under that bed liner. The Thursday night dinners started simply enough. Earl had refused the ambulance after his fall, but I couldn't shake the image of him alone on that ice, too proud to call his son. The next week, I knocked on his door with a container of beef stew from the diner near the hospital. "Just checking your blood pressure," I lied, though we both knew better. "You don't owe me nothing," Earl said, but he let me in anyway. His kitchen was clean but sparse, the refrigerator humming with age, over lukewarm stew. He told me about driving 18-wheelers through blizzards, delivering everything from car parts to Christmas trees. 40 years on the road teaches you to read people like highway signs. Some warn you of danger ahead, others point you toward home. By the third Thursday, he was waiting on the porch despite the February cold. "Truck's been acting up," he said, though I suspected he just wanted company. We spent an hour in his garage, him teaching me to gap spark plugs while sharing stories of truck stops and desert sunrises. The F-150 sat between us, solid and dependable, its moss green paint faded but dignified. "Ray never understood," Earl said, running his hand along the truck's dented fender. "Thinks everything's about the next dollar, the next deal. This truck? Bought her used. But honest, every dent's got a story, every repair done right. That's what matters. Doing things right, even when nobody's watching." The dinners became my anchor through a brutal winter of overdoses and highway pileups. Earl never asked about my divorce or why I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment instead of the house I'd once shared. He just taught me about engines and integrity, two things that seemed increasingly rare in Hawthorne Bend. "You remind me of myself before the world got its hooks in," he said one night in April, after I'd successfully diagnosed a vacuum leak. "Still believe in helping folks without keeping score. Don't let this town beat that out of you." Maya Colton's office felt different the second time, heavier with purpose. She opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder thick with papers. "Earl came to me last August, right after his heart episode. He was very clear about his intentions. The will was straightforward. The truck to me, a few $1,000s to a trucker's charity, nothing to Ray, but the supplementary documents made my hands shake. Financial records dating back 5 years, documenting consulting fees Ray had charged his father, receipts for repairs at TriStar that were never performed, photos of Earl's truck in Ray's yard with for sale signs, dated during times Earl was in the hospital. He knew Ray was planning to take the truck the moment he died, Maya explained. The consulting fees were Ray's way of creating a paper trail, making it look like Earl owed him money, but Earl kept every real receipt, every canceled check. He wanted you to have these in case Ray tries something. The sealed envelope contained more. Handwritten notes about TriStar's operations. Cars towed from accident scenes before police arrived. Salvage titles washed through shell companies. Storage fees that doubled overnight. Insurance companies billed for phantom repairs. Earl had documented everything with the methodical precision of a man who'd spent decades filling out transport logs. "There's corruption in the soil here," Earl had written. "Can't grow nothing clean, but Lena's different. She saves people because it's right, not because there's money in it. The truck's hers now. What's underneath? That's insurance. Ray won't let go easy, but she's tough enough to handle what's coming." I spent hours that night transferring Earl's notes to digital format, cross-referencing dates with my own EMT logs. How many accident scenes had I worked where TriStar arrived suspiciously fast? How many families had I comforted while Ray's drivers hooked their cars? Meters already running? The next morning, I drove to Earl's house with my camera and toolbox. The truck started on the first turn, that old V8 rumbling like distant thunder. I pulled into the garage and began carefully removing the bed liner bolts. Earl had used extra sealant, whatever was underneath. He'd made sure it would survive. The metal box was welded to the truck bed, painted to match. Inside, wrapped in plastic, a USB drive, a leather journal filled with dates and GPS coordinates, photographed documents, and a second title. This one showing Ray had forged Earl's signature on a sale document 3 years ago, then mysteriously never completed the transfer. I sat in that garage, surrounded by evidence of Ray's schemes, understanding finally why Earl had chosen me, not just because I'd been kind, but because I worked in the system Ray corrupted. I had access to accident reports, police contacts, state regulators. I knew which authorities would listen and which were already bought. The truck wasn't just an inheritance, it was a weapon, loaded with truth and aimed at the heart of Ray's empire. Earl had known his son would come for it, would probably resort to violence when he learned about the will, but he'd also known I'd survived one bad marriage and come out stronger. I could handle whatever Ray threw at me. I carefully returned everything to its hiding place, sealed the bed liner, and took new photos of the untampered bolts. Then I called Maya. "I need to know about protective orders," I said, "and what happens when someone violates them, because Ray's going to come for this truck, and when he does, I want to be ready." Saturday afternoon came in hot and sticky, the kind of June day where the asphalt shimmers and tempers run short. I'd moved the truck to my apartment complex the night before, parking it in the spot next to my Honda. The plan was simple: drive it around the block to check the brakes, make sure everything worked before getting it inspected Monday. The engine turned over smooth as butter, just like Earl had taught me to listen for. I eased out of the lot, testing the clutch, feeling the weight of the old truck respond to my touch. The brakes were soft but caught firm when pressed. 2 blocks down, 3 blocks around, just enough to know she was road ready. I was pulling back into the parking lot when I saw Ray's Silverado screech around the corner, Zach hanging out the passenger window. My stomach clenched, but I kept my movements calm, sliding into the parking space like nothing was wrong. Ray was out before I'd set the parking brake, his face purple with rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing with my truck?" "It's not your truck." I kept my voice level, one hand on my phone in my pocket. "Earl left it to me. Legal will, transferred title. Check with Maya Colton if you—" He crossed the distance faster than a man his size should move. The door yanked open. His meaty hand grabbed my arm, hauling me out. My shoulder hit the truck bed hard enough to knock the wind out of me. "I don't give a damn what some paper says." Spit flew from his mouth. "That's my father's truck. My truck. You conned him. Probably screwed him too. You little—" His hand came up, and I turned my head just enough that the slap caught my jaw instead of my ear. The taste of copper filled my mouth. Behind him, Zach laughed, filming with his phone. "Ray!" Mrs. Patterson from 4B stood on her balcony, her own phone raised. "I'm calling the police." He grabbed the keys from my hand, shoving me again. This time I let myself fall, protecting my head but making sure the impact looked worse than it was. EMT training. Sometimes knowing how to fall saves your life. "This truck's been in my yard for years," Ray snarled. "I've got receipts, maintenance records. You think you can steal from me?" He turned to Zach. "Get the toolbox from my truck. We're taking her home." "Actually," I said from the ground, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear, "you just committed assault, theft, and violated about 6 other laws, and everyone's recording." The sirens were already approaching. Living 3 blocks from the police station had its advantages. Ray's face went from purple to white as 2 cruisers pulled in, blocking his Silverado. Officer Diana Morse was first out, a veteran cop who'd worked plenty of scenes with me. "Lena, you okay?" He assaulted me and stole my keys. I stayed on the ground, letting her see the blood on my lip, the red marks already forming on my arm. "I have the title in my apartment. The truck is legally mine, inherited from Earl Mercer. His son Ray just attacked me for driving my own vehicle. Bullshit! Ray stepped forward, but Diana's partner, a young cop named Trevor, moved between them. That's my truck. She's lying. Sir, step back. Diana's hand moved to her radio. Multiple witnesses called in an assault in progress. Ma'am, do you need medical attention? I stood slowly, making sure they documented my disheveled appearance. I want to press charges: assault and battery, theft, attempted grand theft auto. I have the legal documents inside. While Trevor kept Ray and Zach corralled, I retrieved the title and will copies from my apartment. Diana reviewed them, her expression hardening. Mr. Mercer, I need you to return those keys immediately. This is crap. I've maintained that truck for years. Then you can present your evidence in court. The keys, now. He threw them at my feet. I didn't pick them up, letting Diana do it. Maintaining the evidence chain, she handed them to me with a nod. I'm also requesting an emergency protective order, I said. He knows where I live, where I work. He just proved he's violent. The next 2 hours were a blur of statements, photographs, and paperwork. Ray was arrested for assault and battery after Mrs. Patterson and 3 other neighbors provided matching accounts. Zach's own video, which he'd stupidly refused to delete, showed clear evidence of the attack. At the station, I gave my recorded statement, playing up the pain in my shoulder and jaw just enough. Then I called Maya from the lobby. He took the bait? She asked. Hook, line, and sinker, in front of witnesses, with multiple recordings. Good. The protective order will be temporary for now, but with this evidence, we can get it extended at the hearing. Did he say anything about the truck's history? Claimed he'd maintained it for years, had receipts. He's going to try to argue ownership through possession and investment. Let him. Every receipt he produces will be evidence of fraud if Earl never authorized the work. Plus, we have Earl's real maintenance records. Ray just hung himself. I stopped by urgent care for documentation of injuries. Bruised jaw, strained shoulder, abraded arm, minor stuff, but it would photograph dramatically for court. The doctor, who knew me from the hospital, shook his head. Your stepdad did this? Ex-stepdad soon enough. That night, I backed the truck into my garage and installed a steering wheel lock, then set up a motion-activated camera. The temporary protective order was served on Ray at the jail. He'd made bail by evening, but couldn't come within 500 feet of me, my home, or my workplace. But I knew Ray. He wouldn't stop. This was just the first round, and he'd come back swinging harder. Good thing Earl had left me more than just a truck. He'd left me enough ammunition to bury Ray's whole operation. The war was just beginning. Sunday morning. I returned to the truck with fresh eyes and latex gloves. The evidence Earl had hidden needed proper cataloging, and I wanted everything documented before Ray made his next move. The garage was quiet, just the distant hum of traffic and the tick of cooling metal. The welded box came free easier the second time. I spread a clean tarp on the garage floor and began photographing each item before handling it. The USB drive went into an evidence bag. I'd already copied its contents to multiple secure locations, but chain of custody mattered. Earl's journal was a revelation. 40 pages of meticulous notes in his careful handwriting, dates going back 3 years. Each entry detailed another piece of Ray's operation. March 15th. Saw Tommy Chen's Honda at the yard. Cops hadn't released it yet from fatal accident scene. Ray already stripping parts. April 2nd. Ray charged Mrs. Wilson $3,000 to release her car. Tow fee was $200. Storage, $2,800 for 5 days. She's on Social Security. May 20th. Overheard Ray on phone with Brady from insurance. Split is 60-40 on inflated claims. The GPS coordinates matched locations around the county. Illegal dump sites where Ray disposed of hazardous fluids. A warehouse where he stored totaled cars that mysteriously reappeared with clean titles. Spots where his drivers waited to poach accident scenes before official dispatch. But the real goldmine was the photos. Earl had played confused old man while documenting everything with a digital camera. Pictures of falsified inspection certificates, tow trucks with covered license plates, cars marked as salvage being repaired with stolen parts, and most damning, Ray's office safe, open, stacks of cash visible alongside what looked like official DOT documents. I cross-referenced the dates with my EMT call logs. December 10th. Responded to a 3-car pileup on Route 47. TriStar arrived before we did, already hooking cars while I was still checking victims for injuries. January 8th. Elderly man with chest pains, panicking about his impounded car. Ray's driver had towed it from the hospital lot during his cardiac event. The USB contained scanned invoices, bills to insurance companies for work never performed, parts never installed. One folder held audio files. Earl's voice, shaky but clear. "This is Earl Mercer. I'm recording this in case something happens. My son Ray is stealing from accident victims." I'd worked enough crime scenes to know evidence needed corroboration, so I started building a timeline, matching Earl's notes to public records, police reports I could access through work, insurance claims from adjuster friends who'd complained about TriStar's prices, state inspection records that showed miraculous resurrections of totaled vehicles. By noon, I had 3 binders organized: financial fraud, illegal towing practices, and safety violations. Each section tagged with Earl's evidence and supporting documentation I'd gathered. Maya would need this for the civil case, but the criminal implications were bigger. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You think you're smart?" Ray's voice, low and dangerous. "That truck ain't worth what's coming." "Ray, you're violating the protective order by calling me. This conversation is being recorded." "Record this. I know where you work. Know your schedule. Accidents happen, especially to EMTs. Dangerous job." The line went dead. I saved the recording, backed it up, and called Diana Morse directly. "He just threatened me." "File a report. We'll add it to the charges. You somewhere safe?" "For now," I looked at the evidence spread before me. "Diana, I need to talk to someone in financial crimes, and maybe the state police. This is bigger than just assault." That evening, I met with Detective Sarah Coleman from the White Collar Division. Her eyes widened as she reviewed Earl's documentation. "This is extensive. How long do you think your father-in-law was gathering this?" "Stepfather, ex-stepfather, and based on the dates, at least 3 years. He knew Ray would come after his assets when he died. This was his insurance policy. We'll need to verify everything, but if even half of this checks out..." She shook her head. "DOT will want in on this. Insurance Fraud Bureau too. You realize what you're starting?" Ray started it when he built his empire on other people's misery. Earl just made sure someone could finish it. Sarah took copies of everything, issuing me receipts. "Keep the originals somewhere secure, not your apartment. And Lena, watch your back. When this much money's involved, people get desperate." I drove home in my Honda. The truck locked in the garage. Every mirror check, every shadow made my pulse jump. But alongside the fear was something else. Determination. Earl had trusted me with his legacy. Not just the truck, but the truth about his son. Tomorrow, I'd return to work, saving lives while Ray plotted his next move. But he didn't know about the recording, didn't know how deep Earl's evidence went. He thought this was about a rusty old truck. He was wrong. This was about justice, served cold from beyond the grave, and I was just getting started. The email arrived at 2 a.m. Wednesday, sent to a burner account I'd created for exactly this purpose. Maya had suggested the bait, but I'd refined the approach. From Alex Murphy, supposedly a body shop owner from Youngstown. Heard good things about TriStar's discreet services. Got a 2019 Escalade, no papers, needs to disappear clean. Previous owner won't be looking for it. Medical situation, cash business. Interested? By 6 a.m., Zach had responded from his personal email. "We can handle that. Dad runs the paperwork side. Meet Thursday. Discuss rates." I forwarded everything to Detective Coleman with a single word. Hooked? The investigation was moving faster than expected. Coleman had pulled 2 more detectives into what they were calling Operation Towline. The DIOT had assigned their own investigator after reviewing Earl's evidence about falsified inspection certificates, but we needed Ray to incriminate himself directly. "One more exchange," Coleman had said. "Get him to spell out the whole operation. We'll be recording." Meanwhile, the battle at home was escalating through proxies. My mother called during my lunch break, her voice strained. "Lena, honey, this has gone too far. Ray's losing contracts. He says you're destroying our life over some old truck." "Mom, he assaulted me. In public. There's video." "He was upset. You know how he gets about his father. Couldn't you have just talked to him first?" I pulled into the ambulance bay, watching my partner Steve check supplies. "Did he tell you about the protective order? Or that he threatened me?" Silence. Then, "He says you're making that up, that you doctored recordings." "Mom, I need you to listen carefully. Go to your bank, today. Check if Ray has access to your accounts, and look for any documents you might have signed recently about the business." "Why would I?" "Because when this goes down, and it will, you don't want to be financially tied to Tristar. Trust me, please." She hung up, but I'd planted the seed. 20 minutes later, she texted, "Found papers in his desk. My name on business loans. What do I do?" I sent her my lawyer friend's number. Ray had made my mother a co-signer, probably planning to shift assets when the heat came. Classic move for someone expecting legal trouble. That night, I created a new email thread with Alex Murphy, pushing for specifics. Zach took the bait beautifully. "Title wash is $5K. New VIN stamps extra. Dad's gotta connect at DMV. Takes 2 weeks. Bring cash and the ride Thursday 9 p.m. TriStar secondary lot off County 19. Detective Coleman called within minutes of me forwarding the email. "Perfect. We'll have units standing by. You won't be there. But we'll have an undercover play your Alex character." "What about the real investigation? Earl's evidence?" "Grand jury convenes Friday. With what you've given us, plus our own digging, we're looking at 47 counts of fraud. Minimum. The DOT found 16 vehicles TriStar certified as safe that failed independent inspection. One caused a fatal accident last year." My throat tightened. How many crash scenes had I worked? Never knowing some vehicles shouldn't have been on the road? Thursday came with thunderstorms. Fitting weather for what was coming. I worked my regular shift. Every call a reminder of why this mattered. A teenager with a broken leg from a motorcycle accident, his parents frantic about the impound fees, an elderly woman whose medication was in her towed car. Ray's lot closed until she paid cash up front. Steve noticed my tension. "You good? Been jumpy all week." "Family stuff. It'll be over soon." At 8:47 p.m., while I sat in my apartment watching Netflix with the volume high, Detective Coleman texted, "Alex is en route." At 9:23 p.m., "Contact made. Zach explaining operation. Ray just arrived." At 9:41 p.m., "Got it all. Moving in." The news wouldn't break until morning, but I could picture it. Ray in handcuffs, Zach against the hood of a cruiser, the lot swarming with federal agents. Earl's careful documentation had started an avalanche that would bury TriStar completely. My phone rang at 10:15. Mom, hysterical. "They arrested Ray. Lena, what did you do?" "I gave police evidence of his crimes. Mom, evidence Earl collected because he knew his son was dirty. This is about that truck. You destroyed my marriage for a piece of junk." "No, Mom. Ray destroyed your marriage when he decided stealing from vulnerable people was a good business model. I just made sure he got caught." She was sobbing now. "Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do?" "You have your own bank account now. Your name's off the business loans. I know because I helped you file the paperwork. You'll be okay. And Mom, you're welcome to stay with me until you figure things out. After what you did, after what Ray did, there's a difference." I hung up and returned to my laptop, where I'd been drafting a thank you letter to Earl. One I'd never send, but needed to write. The man had spent his final years gathering evidence, knowing his son would likely terrorize whoever inherited his possessions. He'd chosen me not just because I'd been kind, but because he knew I had the spine to see it through. The truck sat in my garage, silent and waiting. Tomorrow, I'd drive it to work. Let everyone see Earl's gift, now truly mine. Ray would make bail eventually, but with federal charges pending and his assets frozen, his power was broken. One old truck had brought down an empire. Earl would have appreciated the poetry in that. Ray made bail Friday afternoon, $50,000 that cleaned out what was left of his unfrozen accounts. By Saturday morning, his lawyer had filed a civil suit claiming ownership of the truck. The grounds were creative. Ray alleged the vehicle was collateral for unpaid loans to his father, that he'd invested $30,000 in maintenance, and that Earl lacked mental capacity when he wrote the will. Maya called me into her office Sunday evening, looking energized rather than worried. "This is perfect. Every claim he's making requires documentation. Documentation that will either prove he's lying or reveal more fraud." She spread Ray's filing across her desk. "Look here. He claims Earl owed him $15,000 in consulting fees, but we have Earl's bank records showing Ray was taking money without permission, and these maintenance receipts he submitted? I had my investigator run the parts numbers. Half are for vehicles that aren't even the same make as the F-150. He's fabricating evidence? Sloppily, his whole operation is unraveling, and he's making desperate moves. The federal prosecutor wants to add obstruction charges based on these false documents. Monday's protective order hearing was a circus. Ray showed up with 3 lawyers, all billing rates he could no longer afford. I sat with Maya and Diana Morse, who testified about the assault and subsequent threatening phone call. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Huang, reviewed the evidence with raised eyebrows. "Mr. Mercer," Judge Huang said, "you're currently under federal indictment for fraud. You've submitted demonstrably false documents to this court, and multiple witnesses saw you assault the petitioner. I'm extending the protective order for 3 years and expanding it to include no third-party contact. Any violation will result in immediate incarceration." Ray's face went purple, but his lawyers kept him quiet. As we left the courthouse, one of them, the youngest, caught my arm. "Your stepfather wants to make a deal, drop the criminal charges, return the truck, and he'll give your mother uncontested divorce plus $25,000. Tell Ray the truck isn't for sale, and I'm not the one pressing federal charges. That's the U.S. Attorney's Office. He made this bed with every falsified document, every illegal tow, every family he squeezed for cash they didn't have." That evening, I got an unexpected call from Northline's dispatch. "Lena, corporate wants to see you tomorrow. Something about the TriStar contract." The meeting was brief but satisfying. Northline's executives had been following the investigation, horrified to learn their primary towing contractor was under federal indictment. "We're terminating immediately," the VP of Operations said, "and we'd like your input on vetting replacement companies. Your documentation helped expose this. We should have listened to field concerns earlier." The dominoes were falling faster now. By Wednesday, 2 more towing companies had cut ties with TriStar. The state suspended their operating license pending investigation. Ray's remaining drivers quit when their paychecks bounced. But Ray wasn't done fighting. Thursday morning, I found Zach in the hospital parking lot, leaning against my Honda. I stopped 20 feet away, hand on my phone. "Relax," he said, hands visible but voice hard. "I'm not violating anything, public property, staying back. Just wanted you to know something." "Your father sent you?" "No, this is from me." He pushed off the car, still maintaining distance. "You think you won, but families like ours, we remember, 5 years, 10 years, we remember who cost us everything." "Your father cost you everything when he built a criminal enterprise. I just showed people what was already there." Keep telling yourself that when you're checking your mirrors forever. Security was already approaching, having spotted him on cameras. Zach walked away without another word, but the threat lingered. I filed another report, adding to the growing pile of witness intimidation charges. That night, Mom finally agreed to meet for coffee. She looked exhausted, 10 years older than 2 weeks ago. "The lawyers say I'm clear. Ray forged my signature on most documents, and the ones I did sign were under false pretenses. I'm glad you're protected. She stirred her coffee, not meeting my eyes. I loved him, or thought I did. Maybe I just loved not being alone. He fooled a lot of people, Mom. Not Earl. Earl saw through him from the start. She finally looked up. I went to the old house, found letters Earl wrote but never sent, warning me about Ray. He was trying to protect us both. We sat in silence, two women processing how blind we'd been. Finally, she asked, "The truck, will you keep it?" Every mile I drive, it reminds me that someone thought I was worth trusting, that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard. Mom nodded slowly. Earl would like that. He always said the measure of a person isn't what they drive, but how they treat folks broken down on the roadside. As I drove home in the F-150, I thought about Earl's words. Ray had built an empire on broken down people, charging them for the privilege of their misfortune. But his own breakdown was coming, and there wouldn't be anyone left to tow him away from the wreckage. The trial was weeks away, but the verdict was already clear in the court of public opinion. The local paper had started a series on predatory towing practices, featuring stories from Ray's victims. Each article mentioned Earl's secret documentation, painting him as a hero who'd fought corruption from beyond the grave. Tomorrow, the grand jury would vote on the federal charges. Coleman was confident. They had Earl's evidence, the sting operation recordings, and now Ray's own fabricated documents to prove a pattern of deception. But tonight, I just drove Earl's truck through empty streets, engine humming its familiar song. Justice was coming in courthouse halls and federal procedures. But this, carrying on Earl's legacy with every careful mile, this was the revenge that mattered most. The final trap required patience. 2 weeks after the grand jury returned a 63-count indictment, Ray was hemorrhaging money on legal fees while his business rotted. Coleman called with an update. He's desperate, tried to liquidate assets, but everything's frozen. Word is he's looking for one big score to fund his defense. What kind of score? Moving high-value parts, cash only. Problem is, nobody trusts him anymore. That's when Maya suggested the endgame. We make him come to us. Use the truck as bait. The plan was elegant. I posted on local classifieds. 1979 F-150, needs work, best cash offer, moving out of state, must sell this week. The photos showed enough to identify it as Earl's truck, but from angles that suggested neglect. Dirty engine, staged rust, strategic shadows. Within hours, Zach texted from a burner phone. Saw your ad. $500 cash today. Worth more than that. Got an offer for $2,000 from a collector. $2,500. Meet at the old Scale House on Route 19. Bring title. The Scale House was perfect. An abandoned truck waste station Tristar had used for years to store questionable inventory. Isolated, but not suspicious. Coleman's team could position units without being seen. I responded, "Tonight 5:30, cash only. Come alone or deals off." Wednesday arrived gray and humid, storm clouds building to the west. I spent the afternoon with Coleman's team, fitting a wire while Maya coached me on protecting myself legally. "If he threatens you, we move immediately," Coleman said. "But ideally, we want him to admit to the falsified ownership documents, get him talking about the original fraud." "And if he brings Zach?" "We have contingencies, but intel says Zach's in Columbus, trying to distance himself from dear old Dad." At 5:15, I drove the F-150 to the Scale House, that reliable engine rumbling through empty roads. The abandoned building loomed like a monument to better times, its parking lot cracked with weeds. Perfect metaphor for Ray's empire. I parked near the old office, positioned so the truck faced the road. Escape route clear. Just like Earl had taught me about situational awareness, the wire felt heavy under my flannel shirt. In my pocket, the real title and a decoy set of papers Maya had prepared. Ray's Silverado pulled in at 5:28, alone as promised. He looked terrible, unshaven, clothes wrinkled, the swagger replaced by desperation. But desperate men were dangerous. "You got some balls," he said, approaching slowly. Advertising my father's truck like that. My truck? Legal title? Remember? Though you seem confused about ownership documents lately. His jaw tightened. Let's see it run. I started the engine, let it idle smooth. Ray circled like a predator, running his hands over the panels. You have no idea what this truck means, what it represents. Tell me. He laughed, bitter and sharp. Everything I built started here. First tow job was with this truck, before I could afford proper equipment. Earl never understood. You gotta take opportunities, not wait for them to come. Like taking cars from accident scenes before families can decide? Like business, supply and demand. He leaned against the tailgate. But Earl had to get righteous, started documenting things, threatening to report his own son, so I had to protect myself. By falsifying ownership papers? By claiming what was mine. The mask slipped completely. I told him, sign the truck over, keep your mouth shut, and I'd take care of him. He refused, so I created the papers myself. Power of attorney, consulting fees, whatever it took. He was getting senile anyway. Senile enough to document 3 years of your crimes? Ray's face went still. You're wearing a wire. I'm selling my truck. You're the one confessing to fraud. He stepped forward, fists clenched, then stopped. Through the dirty windows of the scale house, shadows moved. Reality crashed down on his face. You set me up. No, Ray, you set yourself up the day you decided stealing from vulnerable people was just business. Earl knew you'd come for the truck eventually. He counted on it. The arrest was almost anticlimactic. Coleman's team emerged smooth and professional. Ray, too exhausted to resist. As they read him his rights, adding attempted fraud and conspiracy to his growing list of charges, he stared at the truck. It was never about the damn Ford, he said quietly. It was about him choosing you over blood. He didn't choose me over you, I replied. He chose right over wrong. The truck was just his way of making sure someone would be here to see it through. They led Ray away in cuffs, his empire officially dead. The scale house stood empty again. Just me and Earl's gift in the fading light. Tomorrow, reporters would cover the arrest. Ray's remaining assets would be seized, and his victims would finally see justice. But tonight, I had one last promise to keep. I drove to Riverside Cemetery as the first raindrops fell. Earl's grave was simple. Name, dates. Beloved father, that Ray had probably fought against paying for. I parked nearby and sat on the tailgate despite the drizzle. It's done, I told the headstone. Your boy's going away for a long time. Tristar's dead. The people he hurt will get some restitution from the seized assets. Thunder rumbled in the distance. I pulled out the letter I'd written but never sent, placed it on the grave with a rock to hold it down. Thank you for trusting me, for seeing something worth believing in. I'll take care of her. The truck. Keep her running right, like you taught me. The rain came harder, but I didn't move. This moment needed witnessing. Earl Mercer, who'd spent his last years gathering evidence against his own son, who'd chosen justice over blood, deserved to know his plan had worked. When I finally drove home, the truck's wipers beating rhythm in the storm, I felt the weight of the past months lifting. Tomorrow, I'd return to saving lives, one call at a time. The truck would carry me there, steady and reliable, a reminder that integrity matters more than inheritance. Earl had given me more than a vehicle. He'd given me the chance to prove that sometimes, the family you choose, the bonds built on respect and righteousness, matter more than blood that flows corrupt. The engine hummed its agreement, carrying us home through cleansing rain. The courtroom was packed for Ray's sentencing. 6 months of legal proceedings had revealed the full scope of TriStar's corruption. 127 victims identified, over $2.8 million in fraudulent charges, and a web of bribed officials that reached into 3 counties. I sat in the gallery between my mother and Maya, watching Ray in his orange jumpsuit, looking every one of his 63 years. Judge Patricia Huang reviewed the charges methodically. Mr. Mercer, you built a predatory enterprise that targeted the vulnerable, accident victims, the elderly, those already facing crisis. You corrupted public officials, falsified documents, and when confronted with your crimes, you attempted to intimidate witnesses and obstruct justice. Ray's lawyer made a final plea for leniency, citing his age and previously clean record. The judge wasn't moved. The evidence provided by your late father shows this wasn't a momentary lapse, but a calculated pattern spanning years. The court sentences you to 15 years federal prison, followed by 5 years supervised release. Restitution to victims totaling $2.8 million to be paid from seized assets. The gavel came down with finality. Ray turned as they led him away, his eyes finding mine. For a moment, I expected rage. Instead, I saw something worse: understanding. He finally knew what Earl had known all along, that his choices had consequences, that the bill always comes due. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with cameras and questions. I'd become an unlikely symbol, the stepdaughter who'd brought down a corrupt empire with an inherited truck and a dead man's conscience. But I pushed past them toward the parking lot where Earl's F-150 waited, still running strong. Detective Coleman caught up with me at the truck. "Wanted to thank you again. This case is being used as a model for investigating towing fraud nationwide. Earl's documentation method is being taught at the academy." He'd have liked that, being useful even after. "What about you? What's next?" I ran my hand along the truck's faded paint. Back to work, back to helping people who actually need it. Maybe fix up this old girl properly. Earl never got to finish the restoration he planned. Mom was waiting by the truck when Coleman left. Our relationship had slowly healed over the months, built on honest conversations and her gradual acceptance of who Ray really was. "I'm proud of you," she said simply, "and ashamed it took me so long to see." We all see what we want to see. Ray was good at showing people what they needed. Earl saw through it, and he saw you clearly too. She touched the truck's hood gently. He'd be proud. 3 days later, I was back on shift, responding to a multi-vehicle accident on Route 47. As we worked to extract a trapped driver, a tow truck arrived, one of the new companies Northline had contracted, with clear pricing posted on the door and drivers trained in victim assistance. "Ma'am," the driver said to a shaken woman watching us work on her husband, "here's our rate card and your rights as a vehicle owner. You don't have to decide anything today. Focus on your family. We'll secure the vehicle, and you can call us when you're ready." It was a small change, but it mattered. Every fair tow, every transparent transaction was a victory against what Ray had built. That evening, I drove to Earl's grave one last time. The letter I'd left was gone, taken by wind or rain, but fresh flowers sat in a mason jar. The card read, "Thank you for saving my family from Tristar, the Wilsons." I wasn't the only one who remembered. The truck started on the first turn, ready for whatever came next. As I drove through Hawthorne Bend, past the empty lot where Tristar once stood, past the courthouse where justice had finally been served, I thought about legacies. Ray had built his on extraction, pulling value from misery, towing away hope along with twisted metal. Earl had built his on documentation, carefully recording truth, waiting for someone strong enough to use it. But maybe the real legacy was simpler: the choice to help or harm, to build up or tear down, to drive toward justice even when the road was rough. The F-150's engine hummed its steady rhythm, carrying forward the best of what Earl had left behind. In the end, he hadn't just given me a truck. He'd given me the chance to prove that ordinary people could dismantle corruption, that patience could defeat power, that an old man's faith in doing right could echo long after he was gone. I drove on through the evening light, Earl's truck running true, carrying forward a legacy built not on blood or greed, but on the simple belief that someone would care enough to see justice done. The road ahead was clear, and I had miles to go. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in my situation? Your perspectives make these stories richer for everyone.